Today I'm going to continue on with Daniel chapter 11. In our last lesson I talked about the Egyptian-Syrian wars, and Daniel 11 is a long chapter, but it's a very, very interesting chapter because it is some of the most detailed prophecy in all the Bible, so much so that it's one of the big reasons critics try to say, oh, no, it was written way after the fact. And it has been proven that it was that they were wrong. To me, Daniel 11 was fascinating because it so accurately described what was to come, and we can see by history books that it all happened right down to the tiniest of details. And that builds your faith. And helps us to know that God knows the beginning from the end, and He tells us all about it in His book. And hey, it tells us Jesus is coming again. One day all the wrongs will be made right. One day we're going to see our loved ones again who have passed on. Now, I said all that in the last lesson, and I did some others in between, so you may have to go back and refresh your memory on that one. But we're going to continue on with Daniel chapter 11 today, and starting in verse 20, it says, "Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle." That guy that raised the taxes would be Antiochus, the third son, Seleucus Philopator. One place I read, it says he reigned for 12 years and was assassinated. Another states he was mysteriously poisoned. Apparently he was assassinated by poisoning. He died neither in anger nor in battle, just as Daniel wrote. Somebody just wanted him out of the way and got him out of the way. Verse 21, "And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries." Historically, this was Antiochus Epiphanes. We've talked about him a lot throughout this Daniel study. Daniel Epiphanes is the one who is the type of the Antichrist most vividly in the Bible. The same one that committed the historical abomination of desolation by offering a pig on the temple altar. Antichrist will do something similar in the future, and Jesus warned the Jews about it in Matthew 24:15, and John wrote about it in Revelation 13, verses 11 through 15, except it will not be a pig that is offered by Antichrist. Antiochus was king in Syria and in the line of the Seleucidae, but he was not the rightful heir to the throne, so he got in good with two kings of Pergamum to help him get rid of his political enemies. Things like that still go on today. Then he flattered the Romans so they would be supportive of him as king. So Antichrist is not the rightful heir to God's throne, but he will try every deceitful way he can to have it, including flattering all the kings of the earth, those in political high places and those with money. It worked for Antiochus, and it will work for a while for the Antichrist. Daniel 11:22 through 24, "And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall be strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time." Historically, no one seems to be quite sure about who the Prince of the Covenant is. Some say it was Anias III, who was murdered by the evil devices of Antiochus when he came to power. It's not all that important for believers to know all this history, except to see how totally amazing it is that God knew it all before it happened. It's really not that important for us Christians to see how all this is also going to be fulfilled by the Antichrist in the future, because we're not going to be here. But isn't it grand to see how it all fits together, and that we serve a God who knows the beginning from the end, and in all this we can see that we can totally trust His Word. And you know, there might be some history buffs who would find the historical part very interesting, and it just might get them to take a second look at the entire Bible, even as a critic, to try and prove it wrong. People have gotten saved doing that. There was a book I read once by a lawyer named Frank Morrison. He was set out on proving that the resurrection of Jesus was a myth, a fraud, and he was going to write a book about it. But in doing his research, he became a believer instead. And the book he intended to write was never written, and instead he wrote a book proving the facts of the resurrection called Who Moved the Stone. Even for those not too interested in history, it's good to know at least some of how it all agrees and fits with God's Word so beautifully, accurately, that we would be warning others. We could tell them, hey, you should look at that, compare it. You know, the Bible is true, it's true, it's true. We need to be warning others to make sure they aren't here during the tribulation either. Daniel 11:24 through 32. We looked at 24. Let's look at verses 25 through 26. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. Antiochus attacked Ptolemy Philometor. I may be pronouncing these wrongs. I'm not sure, but it looks like Ptolemy to me. And he defeated him and made Ptolemy's brother king of Egypt. Then he made a peace agreement with them for an excuse to attack Alexandria, and he lost. Ptolemy used the peace accords to make up with his brother. He and his brother were reconciled, and the brother became co-regent with Ptolemy, and together they attacked Antiochus. And that was the fulfillment of verse 27. Both these kings' hearts shall do mischief, and they shall speak lies at the table. They all spoke lies at the table. Meanwhile, the Jews back in Jerusalem had heard that Antiochus had died in battle, which was not true. They were overjoyed, though, thinking he was dead, but it didn't last long. And Antiochus heard of their joy. So he was in a rage anyway over what had just happened, and so on his way back to Syria by way of Israel, he took it out on the Jews and killed about 40,000 Jews, took some as slaves, took away a lot of valuable treasures from their temple. And that goes with verse 28. Then shall he return into his own land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. Later, Antiochus goes back to try and take Egypt, but it didn't turn out so good for him. Verses 29 through 30. At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. The ships of Chittim are thought to be the Roman fleet, which did meet him. A guy named Popilius Lanus put into his hand an official letter from the Roman Senate commanding him to leave their friend Egypt alone. Antiochus read it, and his answer was something like, well, yeah, I'll think about it. Whereupon Popilius Popilius drew a circle in the sand with his staff around Antiochus and said, no, you don't just think about it. Before you step across that line, give me an answer to report back to the Senate, implying that there would be war if he refused. So Antiochus went home, but he did not go home joyfully. The rest of verse 30, he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. He went home, yeah, but he vented all his rage on the Jewish people, and this is when he desecrated their temple. He sacrificed a pig on the altar, sprinkled its blood all over the holy vessels of the temple, and he set up an altar to Zeus, also known as Jupiter, and began offering sacrifices to this idol. He made laws that the Jews could not worship God, but had to worship this idol. When Antiochus launched his assault on the Jews, many forsook their ways and followed Antiochus. The verse says he had intelligence with them. They were spies for him. He corrupted them with flattery, maybe by offering them a position in his palace or money or both. So they forsook the holy covenant. They forsook all they'd known all their life, and they followed him. And so this is going to also happen in the future tribulation with Antichrist as well. Families will betray one another, and a man's foes will be of his own household. This abomination of desolation was the one mentioned by Jesus when he said to those listening in Matthew 24:15-16, "When you therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains." The one spoken of by Daniel happened years before Jesus was born. The abomination spoken of by Daniel happened way before Jesus was born. Jesus was telling them to watch for something like it. The persecution of the Jews by Antiochus Epiphanes and the desecration of their temple led to the revolt of the Maccabees. The Jews won the victory and led them to the cleansing of the temple and the beginning of the Feast of Hanukkah that the Jews still celebrate every year around Christmas. And so that fits with the rest of verse 32. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And this Feast of Hanukkah every year is a reminder of the abomination of desolation. So for the people living during the tribulation, the Jewish people, when this happens again, they're going to remember about a former abomination of desolation. And by this time, early on, there's going to be Jewish people getting saved that are going to have a mark on them of protection, that are going to be going out preaching to all of Israel. Hopefully there will be New Testament Bibles to be found, and they'll start reading this. And I'm glad Matthew is the first book in the New Testament, because in Matthew is where Jesus makes this statement to run to the mountains, to flee Judea, and they will. So that's a brief telling of the historical part of chapter 11. Some commentators go back to verse 20 with comments as to how it all applies to future prophecy. And to me, we do get pictures of the future prophecy throughout the entire chapter. But most definitely, beginning with verse 35, it takes a leap to the future. And most commentators will definitely agree on that. But in the next lesson, I'm going to try to go back and kind of skim over what we went over today, giving you more of a prophetical look at it. So God bless you. I hope this blesses you. And hey, I'm almost through with Daniel. I love the book of Daniel. It's been a blessing to study, but I will be glad to be done with it. I've been working on it all year. As y'all know, y'all who follow me know that, oh my, I am so slow. But we may all have to go back and re-listen to the whole thing because I forget a lot. So God bless you, and be looking for the next study. I'm going to try to not let it be so long in between studies this time.